What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors goes head-to-head with one of television's most controversial hosts? In just 47 seconds, a conversation about politics turns into an absolute meltdown. Bill Maher pushes too far. Robert De Niro snaps back. And what follows is one of the most intense, jaw-dropping confrontations ever caught on live television. This isn't just a disagreement. This is a complete breakdown, ending with a legendary actor walking off set in disgust. Before we dive into this explosive story, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now. We bring you daily videos exposing Hollywood's darkest scandals, the confrontations they don't want you to see, and the truth behind the cameras. Don't miss out. Subscribe now. Last night on Real Time, what was supposed to be a conversation between Bill Maher and Robert De Niro turned into something nobody saw coming. The tension was there from the very beginning, simmering just beneath the surface, waiting to explode. And explode it did. De Niro walked onto the stage to applause from the studio audience. He settled into his chair across from Bill Maher, who was already wearing that smirk he's famous for. The kind of smirk that says he's about to say something provocative. The kind that's made him both loved and hated by millions. Bill Maher started off friendly enough. "Bobby, great to have you here. You've been very vocal lately about a lot of things happening in this country. I want to talk about that." De Niro nodded. "Yeah, I've been vocal because I care about this country. I care about what's happening to people." Right, Bill Maher said, leaning back in his chair. "But you've gotten pretty intense about it. Some people might say you've gone a bit overboard with some of your comments." You could see De Niro's jaw tighten just a little. "Overboard? Bill, we're living in serious times. This isn't a joke." "I'm not saying it's a joke," Bill Maher replied, his hands up in mock defense. "But come on, you've called people some pretty harsh names. You've really let loose on certain politicians. Don't you think that kind of rhetoric, from someone with your platform, maybe adds to the division?" De Niro stared at him for a moment. "You know what adds to the division, Bill? People who sit back and pretend everything is fine when it's not. People who think both sides are equally bad when one side is clearly trying to tear down everything we've built." Okay, Bill Maher said. And you could hear that edge creeping into his voice. That tone he uses when he thinks he's about to make a great point. "But isn't that exactly what I'm talking about? This idea that one side is completely evil and the other side is completely good? That's not reality, Bobby. That's Hollywood bubble thinking." The audience went quiet. You could feel the temperature in the room change. De Niro leaned forward. "Hollywood bubble? I grew up in New York. I've lived through real things. I know what I'm talking about. This isn't about living in a bubble. This is about right and wrong." "But who decides what's right and wrong?" Bill Maher shot back. "You? Me? A bunch of celebrities who live in mansions? Come on." "So what are you saying?" De Niro asked, his voice getting harder. "That we shouldn't speak up? That because we're successful, we should just shut up?" Bill Maher shrugged. "I'm saying maybe you should recognize that you don't speak for regular Americans. Neither do I, for that matter. But at least I admit it." De Niro shook his head. "I speak up for people who don't have a voice, Bill. That's what I try to do." "Oh, please," Bill Maher said, and that's when things really started to turn. "You speak up for your friends at dinner parties in the Hamptons. Let's be honest here." The audience gasped. A few people even booed. De Niro's face went red. "What the hell did you just say to me?" De Niro asked, his voice low and dangerous. Bill Maher realized he might have crossed a line, but instead of backing down, he doubled down. "I'm just saying, Bobby, you've made millions of dollars playing tough guys in movies, but that doesn't make you an expert on what working-class Americans are going through." "I never said I was an expert," De Niro fired back. "But I know bullshit when I see it. And I know when someone is hurting people. I know when someone is lying. And I'm not going to sit here and let you act like caring about that makes me some kind of out-of-touch elitist." "I'm not saying you're an elitist because you care," Bill Maher said. "I'm saying you're an elitist because you act like anyone who disagrees with you is an idiot or a fascist." "I never said that." "Oh, come on. You've said some pretty wild stuff, Bobby. You've compared certain politicians to dictators. You've used language that, frankly, sounds a little unhinged." The word unhinged hung in the air like a bomb. De Niro stood up from his chair. The audience went completely silent. "Unhinged?" De Niro repeated, his voice shaking with anger. You're calling me unhinged? Bill Maher stayed in his seat, but you could see him getting defensive. I'm saying some of your statements have been over the top. Over the top? De Niro said, his voice getting louder. Bill, people are suffering. Democracy is under attack. And you're sitting here in your comfortable chair, making jokes, acting like it's all just entertainment. Acting like both sides are the same. That's not being smart. That's being a coward. The audience erupted. Some people cheered. Some people booed. Bill Maher's face went from smug to genuinely angry. A coward? Bill Maher said, standing up now too. I've been speaking truth to power for 20 years on this show. I've taken on every president, every politician, every sacred cow. Don't you dare call me a coward. Then stop acting like one, De Niro shot back. Stop pretending that taking cheap shots at everyone makes you brave. Stop acting like caring passionately about something makes someone crazy. Bill Maher pointed his finger at De Niro. You know what your problem is? You can't handle anyone challenging you. You're so used to everyone in your world agreeing with you that when someone pushes back, even a little, you lose it. I'm not losing anything, De Niro said. I'm standing up to someone who thinks being cynical is the same as being intelligent. And you think being angry is the same as being right? Bill Maher countered. They were both standing now, facing each other across the desk. The tension so thick you could cut it with a knife. The audience didn't know whether to cheer or stay silent. People were looking at each other, wondering if this was part of the show or if it was real. It was real. De Niro took a deep breath, trying to compose himself. You invited me here, Bill. Did you invite me just to insult me? To tell me I'm unhinged and out of touch? I invited you here to have a conversation, Bill Maher said. But you're so wrapped up in your own righteousness that you can't even have a conversation without getting angry. I'm angry because you're minimizing things that matter, De Niro said. You're acting like people who care deeply about saving this country are just hysterical celebrities. That's insulting, Bill. Not just to me, but to millions of people who are scared right now. Bill Maher laughed. Not a friendly laugh, a dismissive laugh. Scared? Come on, Bobby. You're a multi-millionaire. What do you have to be scared of? That was the moment. That was when De Niro had had enough. You know what? De Niro said, his voice suddenly calm but ice-cold. I thought you were smarter than this. I thought you actually gave a damn about something other than your own ego. But I was wrong. Oh, here we go, Bill Maher said, rolling his eyes. The dramatic exit. Yeah, the dramatic exit, De Niro said. Because I'm not going to sit here and be talked down to by someone who thinks he's above it all. You're not above it all, Bill. You're just another guy with a platform who's more interested in sounding clever than actually making a difference. At least I'm not pretending to be some kind of working-class hero when I live in a penthouse. Bill Maher shot back. The audience was in chaos now. Some people were shouting at Bill Maher to stop. Others were telling De Niro to sit down. But neither of them was backing down. De Niro stepped around the desk, moving closer to Bill Maher. You think this is funny? You think this is just another episode where you can say whatever you want and there are no consequences? What are you going to do, Bobby? Bill Maher asked, and there was real venom in his voice now. You going to threaten me? You going to give me one of your tough guy speeches from your movies? I don't need to threaten you, De Niro said. I just need to stop wasting my time with you. He turned to walk off the stage, but Bill Maher wasn't done. That's right. Run away, Bill Maher called after him. Run back to your bubble where everyone tells you how brave and important you are. De Niro stopped. He turned back around, and for a second, everyone thought he might actually go back and get in Bill Maher's face. The security guards were standing up, ready to intervene if they needed to. But De Niro just stared at Bill Maher. A long, hard stare that said more than any words could. You know what the difference between you and me is, Bill? De Niro said, his voice steady now. I actually believe in something. You just believe in your own voice. That's rich coming from an actor, Bill Maher said. You pretend for a living, and you pretend to care about the truth, De Niro replied. At least I know what I am. The audience was screaming now. People were standing up. Some were chanting De Niro's name. Others were telling both of them to stop. The producers were probably losing their minds in the control room. Bill Maher stepped toward De Niro. You want to know what I really think, Bobby? I think you've lost your mind. I think you've become so obsessed with hating certain people that it's eaten away at you. I think you're a sad old man who's trying to stay relevant by being as loud and angry as possible." The audience gasped. Someone shouted, "Bill, stop!" De Niro's face went pale, then red, then pale again. His fists clenched at his sides. For a moment, everyone thought he might actually swing at Bill Maher. But he didn't. Instead, he laughed. A short, bitter laugh. "Sad old man?" De Niro said quietly. "You know what's sad, Bill? Sitting in your chair, week after week, mocking people who actually give a damn. Making fun of people who are trying to make things better. Acting like caring is weakness. That's what's sad." "I don't mock people who care," Bill Maher insisted. "I mock people who are hypocrites." "Then you must spend a lot of time looking in the mirror," De Niro said. That did it. Bill Maher's face went dark. "Get off my stage," Bill Maher said. "Gladly," De Niro replied. "No, I mean it," Bill Maher said, his voice rising. "Get off my stage right now. This interview is over." "It was over the minute I sat down," De Niro said. "I just didn't realize it yet." He started walking toward the exit, and the audience was in complete chaos. Half of them were booing Bill Maher. The other half were booing De Niro. Nobody could agree on who was right or who was wrong. But as De Niro reached the edge of the stage, Bill Maher couldn't help himself. He had to get one more shot in. "By the way, Bobby," Bill Maher called out, "next time you want to lecture people about morality, maybe remember some of those movie roles you took. Not all of them aged so well, did they?" De Niro froze. The audience went dead silent. That was a low blow, and everyone knew it. De Niro turned around one last time. He looked at Bill Maher with something like pity in his eyes. "You know what, Bill?" De Niro said softly. "I've made mistakes. I've said things I regret. I've done things I wish I could take back. But at least I can admit that. At least I can grow. At least I can look at myself honestly. Can you?" Bill Maher didn't have an answer for that. "That's what I thought," De Niro said. And then he walked off. He didn't storm off in a rage. He didn't slam anything or curse or make a scene. He just walked off with his head held high, leaving Bill Maher standing there on stage, suddenly looking very small. The audience didn't know what to do. Some people started clapping for De Niro. Others sat in stunned silence. A few people were arguing with each other. Bill Maher tried to recover. He walked back to his desk and sat down, attempting to regain his composure. "Well," Bill Maher said, trying to sound casual but failing, "that was intense. I guess Bobby couldn't handle a real conversation." But the audience wasn't buying it. People were booing him now, really booing him. Hey, Bill Maher said, holding up his hands. "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking." "No, you're not," someone shouted from the audience. Bill Maher looked genuinely rattled. "Okay, well, we need to take a break. We'll be right back." But as the cameras cut away, you could see Bill Maher's face. The smugness was gone. The confidence was gone. He looked like a man who had just realized he'd made a huge mistake. Meanwhile, backstage, De Niro was being surrounded by people. Production assistants were asking if he was okay. His publicist was on the phone. Other staff members were trying to figure out what just happened. But De Niro was calm. He'd said what he needed to say. He'd stood up for what he believed in. And he wasn't going to apologize for it. "I'm fine," he told everyone. "Really? I'm fine." Someone asked him if he wanted to make a statement. "No," De Niro said. "I think I said everything I needed to say out there." He grabbed his jacket and headed for the exit. As he walked through the backstage area, crew members were giving him nods of respect. Some even started clapping. De Niro nodded back at them, a small smile on his face. He pushed open the door to the parking lot and stepped outside into the night air. The cool breeze felt good on his face after the heat of that confrontation. Behind him, the studio was in chaos. Producers were scrambling. The audience was still buzzing. And Bill Maher was probably trying to figure out how to spin what just happened. But De Niro didn't care about any of that anymore. He'd come on the show hoping to have a real conversation about things that mattered. Instead, he'd been mocked, belittled, and insulted. And when he'd stood up for himself, he'd been kicked off. But that was okay. Because sometimes standing up for what you believe in means walking away from people who will never understand. Sometimes it means knowing when a conversation isn't worth having anymore. Sometimes it means recognizing that some people care more about being right than being decent. As De Niro got into his car, he looked back at the studio one last time. He could see the lights blazing inside. The cameras probably still rolling. Bill Maher probably trying to salvage the rest of his show. De Niro shook his head and started the engine. He'd been in this business for over 50 years. He'd seen it all. He'd worked with the best and the worst. He'd been praised and criticized. He'd won awards and been forgotten. But through it all, he'd tried to stay true to himself. He'd tried to stand up for what mattered. He'd tried to use his voice for something more than just himself. And tonight, he'd done that again. Maybe Bill Maher would never understand. Maybe half the people watching would think De Niro overreacted. Maybe the headlines tomorrow would paint him as the bad guy. But De Niro had learned a long time ago that you can't control how people see you. You can only control how you see yourself. And when he looked in the mirror tonight, he'd see someone who didn't back down. Someone who stood up to a bully. Someone who refused to be silenced. That was enough. Back inside the studio, the show was wrapping up. Bill Maher was doing his closing monologue, trying to act like nothing unusual had happened. Trying to spin the confrontation as just another spirited debate, but everyone who was there knew the truth. This wasn't a debate. This was a man pushing another man too far, and then acting surprised when that man pushed back. This was a host forgetting that his guests are human beings with feelings and limits, not just props for his comedy. This was Bill Maher, learning, at least for one night, that not everyone will sit there and take his crap with a smile. The cameras finally stopped rolling. The audience filed out, everyone talking about what they'd just witnessed. Some people were Team Bill Maher, some were Team De Niro. Most were just shocked that it had gotten so heated. As the crew started breaking down the set, someone asked Bill Maher if he wanted to talk about what happened. Nothing to talk about, Bill Maher said, but his voice was tight. He couldn't handle the heat, so he left the kitchen. But everyone could see through that. Bill Maher had crossed a line, and he knew it. He'd let his ego and his need to be provocative override basic human decency, and it had blown up in his face. As Bill Maher left the studio that night, he was alone. No crowd of admirers, no one patting him on the back telling him he was right. Just him and the knowledge that he'd screwed up badly. Meanwhile, across town, De Niro was home. He poured himself a drink and sat down in his living room. His phone was blowing up with calls and texts, but he ignored them all. He didn't need to explain himself to anyone. He didn't need validation or approval. He'd done what he'd done, and that was that. As he sat there in the quiet, he thought about the confrontation, about Bill Maher's words, about his own anger, about how it had all spiraled out of control so quickly. And he realized something. He didn't regret any of it. Not one word. Because sometimes you have to stand up. Sometimes you have to say enough is enough. Sometimes you have to walk away from toxic people and toxic situations, even if it makes you look bad. Especially if it makes you look bad. Because your integrity is worth more than anyone's approval. Your values are worth more than anyone's platform. Your self-respect is worth more than any interview or any show or any moment in the spotlight. De Niro smiled to himself, took a sip of his drink, and relaxed into his chair. Tomorrow, the internet would explode, with takes and hot opinions and people choosing sides. Tomorrow, the think pieces would be written, and the social media fights would rage. Tomorrow, everyone would have something to say about what happened between him and Bill Maher. But tonight, right now, in this moment, De Niro was at peace. Because he'd been true to himself. And in the end, that's all that really matters.